See a lot of topics on, you heard from Bain, you heard Louise and Florian, there's going to be more on analytics and so forth. Give you a bit of a framework. So imagine that you stepped into a brand and you want to create a luxury brand, or you're one of the current one, very established. What would be the framework to look at in terms of whether you do well and how to do it? So I'm more thinking in this presentation, we wanted to put a session where what are the boundaries, what are the processes, some kind of a checklist, how to become global and how do you become very iconic. So imagine right now you have very successful players, but some of you might also join a brand, find a little hidden jewel, and we're going to meet again in 3 to 5 years. Someone today would take very courageous decision to make that happen, according to Peter Drucker. So whenever something is successful right now, look at luxury, look at some of the big consumer brands, car brands, disruption. Someone took that decision. That's what we're going to discuss today. But what is really a global brand when it comes to it? It goes through phases and it loops all the time. Very often I think this kind of notion of being global, I think is abused, misused, misunderstood. Because I think if you want to go all the way to the right hand, you need to have a purpose. You need to think about what your offering is in terms of localization. You're just going to standardize, or how much you're going to listen to the individual consumers. We had this kind of product as a hero earlier today. Something about culture, and in the end, as you go through the phases, it may come together. You have some players today, but you're also going to have new players emerging, and that's what this kind of the notion of this presentation is going to get us through to. I think luxury has to evolve somehow, and you could ask yourself, luxury as an industry. Is it very art-driven, not in terms of art as art, but in terms of much more emotion, feelings, I believe, I sense, I think it just should be like it is, compared to certain players in automotive, people in consumer goods, the P&Gs, the Unilevers of the world, that obviously make use of a lot of data, a lot of insights, a little more mathematical, and anywhere in between of those two. Maybe luxury is very much on the left-hand side. Maybe luxury can learn from the right-hand side. But on that notion also, I think a lot of brands in the recent years have become very, very obsessed with big data. I think there's a lot of truth data in big data. I'm going to make a call for that to make that happen as well in this industry. But I think we have to be careful as well, because you cannot necessarily calculate everything into a brand, into a successful enterprise. There's also a certain art to that. So I want you to think on the scale of those two on this diagram, where should the industry be? The company you're going to work with, the company where you are, the brand that you're going to work with in the years to come, where should that be? Is there a need for change here? I think there is. There's one study here just to accomplish what Bain has done so well. McKinsey has done stuff in luxury as well. And you see, yes, a lot of it is definitely about the intangibles, the narrative, the perception, but there's also a lot of work to be done, actually a lot of value to be created in terms of strategy. And you mentioned, Joelle, something very important, execution, which I'm also going to touch upon. That's very important. I think personally relates very much to culture, and that adds up being value. So we somehow need to think about that model, and I think that's going to be the underlying notion why we put this session in. Where do you want to be, and where do you think the industry should be? So first of all, you need to have a strong purpose. And you have seen in my world of branding, marketing, strategy, we always talked about brand identity, but I think when it comes to purpose, it goes slightly deeper. Very established brands, the Hermès of the world, the Louis Vuittons of the world, many of them have long history, long legacy, a lot of vintage, a lot of myth, a lot of storytelling. So yes, there is a lot in their purpose. But for many other brands, and those included, it is important to, I would say, go a little deeper into really try to define what is really the core of the brand, where does it come from, and you heard some of those notions this morning, we'll hear much more in the afternoon, in order to be able to share it. What do we mean by that? I've just given you one example here, and you will give all the slides here, so don't worry about the details. I'm absolutely guaranteed you cannot see it in the back, apologize for that. But here's just an example from an Asian fashion retailer that is very aspirational, definitely want to get out there. And we spent a few years to kind of nail down what's the purpose of the business and why can you claim it. And that purpose is not a season. It's not a product launch. It's not just I would say, the life of one manager, that sometimes director even, that spent 2 to 5 years with the company. This goes much, much, much longer. This is not going to change by the quarter, by the year. This is much more long term. So I think first of all, we need to define what is really the purpose. Why am I set in this world to do as I do? This is not a luxury brand, but might be a brand that aspires to become premium, and who knows later than that. It was founded in 1949. Jim Thompson fought in the wars in Asia during the World War II, and he settled in Thailand because he was in love with that. And he founded the Jim Thompson Silk Apparel Company, where he kind of discovered how well the Thais did silk. Long story short, disappeared in 1967. His body was never recovered. He disappeared on a jungle trip or a holiday weekend north of Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia, and the company lived on. But they're authentic. They got a story, got something from Asia, which is mythical to people that are not too aware of the region and so forth. So somehow that purpose has to be in there, and that's a myth, but of course it also has to have a modern twist. So that's a starting point. First of all, defining who are you? What makes you different? Why can you compete? All of that. Second one is also about business impact. And very often, not only in this industry, but other industries, sometimes people shy away from it, particularly when it comes to branding, because it's all about building brands today. It's not so much about supply chain, right? In supply chain, we have the bits and bytes and the numbers and the big data. Financial, we have it. Operations, we have it. Sometimes even retail operations and so forth. But on an overall level, why should we invest and nurture, maintain, curate this brand in the first place? Because it drives value. 10, 15 years ago, we could not put a number on it. It was long disputed. It was one of those, and I think there's still a certain sense of myth in marketing and brand that we can't kind of measure it, but I think a lot of work has been done, and truly when it comes to brand management, a lot of work has been done. Here's just one example. I could have shown you several. I'm sure Bain has an example as well, that if you have strong brands versus a general portfolio, they actually yield better results. The brand is worth more. Why? Because it's driving loyalty, it's driving premium, sustained pricing, all of that. Some of those issues that we're also discussing today. We need to be able to put a value on it. 10 or 15 years ago, when I had my education, when I came out of INSEAD 1999, we thought we could, but I don't think science kind of backed it up fully. But today you actually have things that are accepted by the JAB, the General Accounting Principles that you all know very well, and so forth. So it's been much more accepted by investment banks, by the tax guys, associations, and companies themselves to put a value on it. So that's the second part. Why invest in this in the first part? Because we can put a value on it. And you see these are called the beauty contest of annual rankers. I'm not so much after who ranks where. The most important thing is that the company can actually put a value on it. That's the second part. The third part is that you need to have the top level engaged. Yes, we see CEOs in luxury. We see them in premium. We see them in other industries. But you'll be surprised in how often where I would say the C-suite or even the center marketing doesn't really take center stage. I think it also becomes really truly brand driven. You need to have what I call the triangle here. And that's first of all, yes, leadership, purpose, strategy, and so forth, where you got the CEO, you got his or her team at that sense, but you can have a very strong strategy, but you can lack in innovation, you can lack in culture. How many of you had a Nokia? And the rest of you are lying. You all had a Nokia. I had several of them. And I was very late to get it go. What happened to Nokia? It was such a famous brand. It was amazing, right? What happened? Died, exactly. Gone, dead, bought by Microsoft, whatever happened. Nokia had great leadership. The CEO of Nokia was celebrated. Mr. Lilja did very good. Nokia had actually very strong company culture. It's not a young company. People thought this company came out of nowhere. It had roots and legs back in Finland for years. Strong culture too. Can't beat the Finnish. But they lacked innovation. How many of you have any technology brands from Taiwan? Mobile phones, a bike, computer, anything? A few hands, very reluctantly. Probably because there aren't really that many Taiwanese brands, right? But I can guarantee you, if you look at innovation in Taiwan, it is unparalleled, at least in the Asian region. I've done a lot of work for the Taiwanese government, hosted a couple of conferences, and I keep, I would say, beating them up every year, because the message is the same. Guys, you are amazing in innovation. You have a lot of IP, you have a lot of trademarks, you have a lot of formulas, a lot of good stuff, a lot of good products. But you lack leadership and strategy, and you lack the culture, and I'll come back to culture later, to carry that out. And you unplug one of these, I don't think it will work. You can have a very charismatic CEO, but if you lack innovation, Nokia, culture, so forth. You can have a strong strategy, you have great products, innovation, whatever that is, but if you don't have a culture, and I think culture is very important when it comes to luxury, it's not going to work for you. These are hard choices, and sometimes in client discussions in workshops, very hard for people to understand why, because isn't it just about branding and marketing? Do we really need to go into kind of the CEO's table and we're going to work with culture? I thought we were just doing marketing here. No, you're going to get your hands dirty and you're going to get that together. Second thing is, I still think marketing has a job to do in terms of sitting at the table. Only 2 to 3% of the Fortune 500 companies would have a CMO or whatever title. Chief Communications Officer, Director, whatever, it doesn't matter what it is, but someone that sits at the table, sits in the boardroom, where you normally have what I call the closely knitted twins of the CEO and the CFO, but rarely would you actually have marketing in whatever capacity, marketing, brand, communication, that kind of box, sitting at the table. One of the key reasons, as an Asian example, I believe Samsung came so close to victory. We all know that the chairman, Lee Kun-hee's son, J.Y. Lee, has a big job to do right now because Samsung are challenged on several fronts right now, is because his dad, I think on a very bold level, back in 1998, hired Mr. Eric Kim, Korean American, came back to Samsung, and he took up office next to the chairman. Unheard of in Asia, unheard of. Not only hiring some senior marketing dude, but to let this guy sit next to the chairman, to the owner of the company. Rarely happens in Asia. Happens in the Western world, but it could happen on a much, much larger scale. Why? As you have heard today, that you're going to see later, because marketing has to play a much, much broader role, but it has to be part of the strategy team and not a function that is just brought in once in a while. We'll listen to a bit of insights and a report from a consultancy. No, you need to integrate it. You need to live it. You need to make sure it's part of the C-suite. Second change. We need to make sure we drive innovation. So once we have that purpose, we've got the C-suite, we know how to value it, we also need to make sure that we drive innovation. And I think one of the best examples, I think, is Nespresso. Where did that come from? A company, the bagger Nestlé, that is known for, I would say, many other great things, but they have not at all been in that space. The only commonality is that they're good at coffee, but we never thought about Nestlé as a coffee company yet. I mean, it's a smaller part of the portfolio, and it came out of nowhere, which I think is it's very inspirational, but it's also a wake-up call. Why? Because they have definitely innovated, and this has hurt someone. Yes, the pie has grown, but they have also challenged either competitors, indirect competitors, people at the border zone. Where did that come from? Brilliant innovation, not only to produce coffee, but the entire ecosystem. They almost put it so brilliantly together. I was in San Francisco last week, the week before last, walked into the downtown flagship store of Nespresso. Beautiful restaurant, cafe, you pick up your capsules in the basement. I don't know how many machines and new pieces there were. It's just beautiful. It was one big sensory experience, and it wasn't here just a few years back. What happened? Someone had a very bold vision, a very bold purpose, and a good team to, what we heard from Joel, to execute and pull that off. That does not mean that we're going to get away from the product. I think there's a beautiful statement from, that's a former CEO, it's not part of it's not one of the current, is a family sign, but we don't have a policy of image, we have a policy of product. And you can say these guys hardly change it, right? Comes only not that frequently. So sometimes product at the center as well. So you're going to find that model where are we doing this, which is so heavily curated, which is so much on the purpose, and is doing so well, what we talked about, and I pretty much agree also what we heard from Joel, there's a recalibration, there's a new normal coming. This is not what we saw. I've been in Asia for the last 17 years. I've surely been part of the party out there. It's not going to be that way. So it would be very tempting just to go all out. But we're going to find a level between the product and, of course, new innovations. Where do you want your model to be? Where should we be? Then you have to balance promise and delivery. And you're going to be obsessed with the journey. I'm going to give you a few examples here. Here's a journey. This is more like a lecture type style because recent research have seen it's not like I'm unaware, I become aware, in the end I'm a loyal user. It doesn't happen that way. You might just stumble on a BMW, and then later on you learn a little more about what it is. It goes in loops. McKinsey, among several others, had done a lot of research in terms of how it actually has a lot of loops, and we go back and trial and error. So it's more like circular than linear that you see here. But just for kind of general appreciation of the concept, think about the journey from the very first point where she knew nothing about you towards the point where that bond is so strong that she's deeply in love with the brand. Might even leave it at some point. And it loops again. How well do you execute across all those touch points? One company, and I deliberately use examples from kind of outside the industry because they're all given and we'll have a lot of luxury content today, which is great, is Singapore Airlines. Singapore Airlines was born in, kind of the first idea came in 1967. You all know Singapore got thrown out of the Malaysian Federation back in 1965 October, so a very young politician, Lee Kuan Yew, went back to Singapore and he knew they had nothing. They still ran a dual airline with the old enemy. They have a love-hate relationship between Singapore and Malaysia, still exists today. But they decided in October 1973 to have the first flight. That was the first flight on Singapore Airlines because they simply disintegrated with Malaysian Airlines that also runs an airline out of Malaysia. What they did very early on, they said, we're going to simply focus on service. And an underlying notion of technology that we're not going to boast too much about, but the technology would actually provide great service. So we're going to be great service and we've got to make sure we deliver that. Anyone else could have done it, right? You got strong legacy players from America. You got British Airways or British Caledonian Airways at that time. You got Thai Airways, very strong one. Scandinavian Airlines out of Copenhagen, out of the Scandinavian countries were very, very strong at that time. But they came up and they kind of did that. Brought to life the Singapore girl, first one to bring the hot towel, which at that time was a major piece of innovation. And it has a scent called St. Florence Waters. It's patented in 14 trademark classes. It's not the perfume of the cabin crew. They're not allowed to wear perfume. But it's kind of the scent of the cabin and those hot towels. 6 months later, someone else came up with a hot towel because they could not patent the hot towel, but they could patent the scent. First one to fly the Concorde, first one to kind of come up with warm, freshly brewed coffee on board and so forth. And the latest one to bring the big bird on to the skies, the A380. Anyone couldn't do that, right? I can also buy a 380. Singapore Airlines has 26 A380s on order. I think they got most of them. The rich sheikh from Dubai, Emirates, he has 146 big birds on option. But it doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to provide a great way to fly because it's actually how you operate it. That's why you train people. Here's a sneak preview into the operational center of the training academy outside Singapore Airport, and where a normal airline will train people 2 to 3 weeks. Actually, the FAA, the Federal Aviation Authority of America, requires you to train people for 3 weeks in order to become cabin crew because it's all about safety. It's all about opening the emergency door. God forbid it, if it happens. Then came food and white wine and hot towel and a good experience. It's not meant to be in the beginning. It's just a very functional thing to be cabin crew. Singapore Airlines trained the cabin crew for 4 months. Where they could have cut it short, they could have done it 3 weeks. All the airlines come close to that. Why do they do that? They do it because they want to make sure people, first of all, understand the purpose of what a young nation back in the 60s wanted to set out to do, to bring to the world great service in the air, which is very difficult because things go wrong in the air all the time. And they want to make sure that people bring it to life. Not on a single flight, not on a single week, not in a quarter, but constantly over a very long period of time. Dealing with people in the organization is some of the toughest. Getting people to execute, not only execute because I tell you, but to take ownership and do it in the right way. So you get into your first job, you know what to do. After a while, you know how you do it, and then you know why I do it. That's why you are out of INSEAD, in your current jobs, that's exactly why you got hired in the first place. This is where you get your bonus, this is where the boss is happy. This is where you feel you're accomplished. You do what you're supposed to do, and a little more than that. The reason why you would train people much, much further than 3 weeks is you want to make sure that you get care-wise. What I call self-motivated creativity. You're not only successful, but you outperform. People haven't thought about that you should do as you actually did. Why is that important? That's important because you can, first of all, you can wow your customers, but you can also making sure that it happens throughout all the touch points and getting away from that kind of thinking about manuals and what to do when James and Camille, all our potential clients come into the stores. Here's an example. A couple of months back, I flew out of Beijing back to Singapore on a late flight on a Friday, had a long week in China, it's been a very tough week, and I never travel in a suit because I hate being on an aircraft in a suit. So I kind of dressed down in my t-shirt and my old jeans, and I look like a backpacker. That night, because I have a very high level, they kind of let me into the aircraft before the drill was over. They have something called the drill before you let on passengers, which is security, got the right wine, how many passengers, whatever's going on. So I kind of slipped into the aircraft. It was just being cleaned, the cabin crew was busy doing their stuff. They awaited us maybe 10 minutes later. I slipped into the aircraft. And I walked into one of the first cabins, and one of the young cabin crew came towards me and said, "Mr. Roll, welcome back." I was like, first of all, stumbled over. How would he know who I were? I don't know him. There are 5,500 cabin crew on Singapore Airlines. I sit down on my seat and got my carry-on bag in the bin, and 2 minutes later, he kind of arrived, put newspaper and water and everything in front of me, and I kind of looked at the newspaper. This is a live picture. For Mr. Roll, warm welcome back. That's a care why. He's not supposed to do that. That's not in the academy. Why should you know? He doesn't even know my name. He must have called the gate, otherwise he wouldn't know that. He did not even, which you're supposed to do, check the boarding card once you enter the door because you're getting into something called the safe zone. He didn't. Security slip. Anyway, but the name was there. How did they do that? He's not supposed to do it, but he's a care why. He knew exactly how many 16 or 17 passengers in the first cabin, might have seen a picture, might have called the gate. My point is, it's a care why. That's why you bring that little promise and deliver it to life, and it's not only in a manual, but that's why it actually happens in the real world. Then you need to make sure that you have intelligent systems in place, you have insights. We heard it, there was kind of an underlying notion in some of the past presentations here. So you really need to make sure that insights are fed back. And think about this model here in theory. It goes from left to right. This is what I want to do. I want to expand. I'm pushing out my products. And in the end, there's somebody called a customer that picks it up. What most companies, I would say, still struggle despite of big data. Despite of this word insight, which I think is a bit of a fad in a sense. It's a buzzword, it's a management word, because in reality it's really tough to make it happen. How well equipped are you, your brand, your companies, to feed back information? Not only every quarter, every year, but real time. From right to left, back to headquarters. What do people want? Are they disappointed? Something didn't work, something a little detailed. Maybe we should work on that security lab on Singapore Airlines entry into the safe zone, whatever. Very good example here. And it may not, of course, apply to luxury because there's a very big distance between luxury and Inditex and Zara. But I can guarantee you one thing. There's one thing they're good at. They're pretty successful, but there's one thing they're very, very good at. They are very good at listening to their customers, real time, and they will act on it. Imagine this example. This morning in Paris, a couple of hours earlier in Tokyo, Singapore, Hong Kong, and in a few hours, about now, New York, San Francisco, younger women walk into Zara and they ask for pink scarves. Zara doesn't have pink scarves, doesn't exist. They have a lot of white dresses and underwear, scarves, all sorts of things, but no pink scarves. What happens when you have a viral? Kind of starts slowly and suddenly it accelerates. So suddenly throughout the day today, a lot of young women have asked for pink scarves. Zara listens. Why? Because in Zara Inditex, the pyramid, the organization is upside down. In our world, the traditional world, definitely in the luxury world, you either got the CEO or the designer on top of the pyramid, right? Then you got someone called store managers and store assistants here in the bottom somewhere. Typical retail hierarchy, sorry to say. It's all fine. It's an organizational chart. Sarah's opposite. The most important, you see this range, you take the pyramid and you turn it upside down. These are the shop managers. In the bottom sits Mr. Ortega, I think the third richest guy in the world. According to himself, he's nobody. Nobody. He has no power, doesn't matter how money he has. The most important thing in his company, he's obsessed with people at the retail level. Why is that? Because they have empowered, authorized, encouraged people at the store level to listen to customers. First of all, they won't really intrude that much once you walk into the store, but they will be there if you need them. But most importantly, they will pick up those subtle seismographic requests that you all come with in stores of whatever industries, pink scarves. So when a young product manager, under 30 years old by the way, goes to work at INSEAD, or she came to work this morning, 6 hours past now, there will be something on the POS system. They actually have IT systems that supports it, where she suddenly realizes, wait a minute, we had 14 or 800 or 400 requests on pink scarves. And in 7 working days, she's empowered. She's not going to walk into Mr. Ortega. She's authorized to do it. Produce 4 million pink scarves, 7 working days. Designed, procured, manufactured, shipped, and sold in Zara stores. If you come after 7 days, they're normally sold out, there'll be new pink scarves. Is that what luxury is supposed to do? Of course not. It doesn't work that way in luxury. My point is, how good are we at listening? Inditex is very good at listening. Why? Because they have empowered the most important people in the organization, which are celebrated. They are heroes, to be at the top of it. And they're encouraged to do it. And a lot of heroes, and you'll hear about it every year, make sure that information flows back in the chain here. Then you also want to make sure that you measure on all the KPIs. And I still think when it comes to brand management, it's still the power of the brand. If we believe that is so strong, it is still treated as a marketing thing. Marketing KPIs, and a function sitting in a function called marketing, brand, communication, whatever that is called. But I think you need to bring it out. For example, if I deal with purchase, the purchase department or procurement, brand and marketing KPIs are useless to these guys. Doesn't mean anything. So you're going to translate it. When my book came out the first time, 10 years ago, and it was rewritten last year, it took us 9 months to negotiate with Singapore Airlines to get the book on board. We knew they wanted the book to be sold online. But it took 9 months to negotiate. Why? Because people in procurement, they know very well the strengths of the brand, so in order for Singapore Airlines, they do have a strong brand, those KPIs in procurement suddenly related to the strengths of the airline. So it took us 9 months to get it. When I graduated from INSEAD, nobody wanted to work for Samsung. It's impossible to get people to work for Samsung. It was like, what? From where? Korea? Are you crazy? This is 17 years ago. It sounds offensive. In the years to come, you have tons of people showing up at the door. Probably because there were KPIs in human resources that at least the brand did not support because they would have given you anything. They came to INSEAD, came to Fontainebleau, they gave a standard offer. It was the best, it was topping all the consultancies in terms of monetary expectancy of the job. You can come back to France 2 years later, you can run Samsung as a GM in Samsung, unparalleled. Nobody wanted to join. But the brand became more prominent. And suddenly for human resources, the brand meant much, much more. So once you get back to the office, study those. I think that's just how you translate, I would say, brand KPIs into all the functions so it becomes relevant. So we make sure that people move in the same direction, whatever it takes, in order for the brand to get in there. Then you need to make sure that culture supports it. Here's a wonderful quote from Peter Drucker: "Culture eats strategy for breakfast." Now we have decided that we want to bring this brand out, we want to revitalize it, we want to expand, we want to do whatever. And in most cases, fully supported. I also heard from Joel, good to hear. I mean, execution is just so tough. Why? In most cases, 2 banks merge, a brand is acquired, M&A, whatever, portfolio trimming, culture just comes in the way of it. Here's another example. You're aware of Sarah Home, right? A couple of years back, very young, recent graduate, 18 years old, 19 years old, Camille, came in, and if you go to Intertech's headquarters in La Coruña, it's not like the typical ivory tower with the CEO, rich guy with his bodyguards and the key designers and the daughter, a couple of VPs, director sits in the ivory tower. No. You go into the women's design department that has 450 designers from all over the world. In the middle of that department sits Mr. Ortega. He has a desk. There's 2 computers operated by 2 secretaries because it doesn't operate a computer. It doesn't bother. He writes on paper. So late night, one of the young, she was recently hired by Sarah. She was nobody, supposedly, 19 years old, recently hired. Walked over to Mr. Ortega. Mr. Ortega, can we talk? Yeah, come on, sit down. Who are you? I had this idea, why do we sell home accessories? Why do we do a home store? Mr. Ortega said, Camille, that's a wonderful idea. Why don't you? And she was thrilled, but dared not to show it, right? He's a rich guy and he's so famous. Can you just come back to me tomorrow morning with just write on a serviette. He hates PowerPoints. So for all of us in management consulting advisory, forget about these places here. Can you just come back and write on a serviette how we're going to kick that off? And she worked all night. She had 200 PowerPoints, and I'm sure it was her school project, whatever. She came back prepared to the teeth the next morning. And she went to Mr. Ortega and presented what to do. That was her vision why this home accessory was a good idea. And he kind of cut her short after 5 minutes. Camille, brilliant idea. Let's do it. And that's where you can see in her face that this was a pretty damn good thing. She was obviously very happy. And her first question, who's going to be the boss? Who am I going to work for? Work for, Mr. Ortega said. Camille, you're going to run it. 10 years later, less than 30 years old, is more than $1 billion US. My challenge to you guys, does that happen in your organizations? Because you never know where sources of new revenue, innovation, crazy ideas that you may have to kill, and we have to kill a lot of crazy ideas, particularly in luxury, because it doesn't fly all of it, because you may have Camille's, young graduates who are nobody in your organizations. Because there's a lot of hierarchy in luxury. Think about that as you get back on the job. Then you need to make sure that you drive constant change. You never want to have arrogance and complacency to come in. I made this statement this morning that I don't mind a certain sense of arrogance. It is an elitarian thing to kick off something in luxury. It's not for everyone. There's a scarcity. Had great examples from Joelle, we heard from Louise and Florian. Gonna hear more later. But somehow still, just make sure that you're still keeping your own change agent, that you have systems in place, being culture with Camille, the pink scarves, discussions at the right level, so you see things coming when they come at the right time. That's why I think luxury at this juncture is, are you going to focus on getting better? Meaning we are creating and we are learning a bit, and when I know by learning, that's how it flows through the funnel. We saw that before, pink scarves, that's learning. Learning is also traveling, inspiration, source of new talent. Learning is a lot of things. But many companies have been focusing on executing so well. Are you going to spend more time on getting different? Because this industry, leather, textile, all sources of raw materials that goes into luxury products, are we going to spend more time learning and creating? Where's the balance going to be? Are we going to get better? Are we going to get different? Give you one example. Nice little example from Fullerton. Fullerton is the old post office in Singapore. It used to be actually next to the ocean. Now it's next to a river, but Singapore has obviously claimed a lot of land. It became a hotel 15, 16 years ago, almost when I moved there, a couple of years later. And when it opened, there was a lady, Mrs. Chin from Hong Kong, 65 years old, came to Fullerton, stayed in a room, and over the coming year, came back every month. It started to annoy the housekeeping folks, because Mrs. Chin, every morning, when the housekeeping went in, this lovely little elder lady from Hong Kong, she had stapled phone books. We had something called phone books, remember, with the phone numbers and all gone. Stacked the phone books in front of her bed every morning. And housekeeping patiently took the books back in the shelf. Until, after a while, one of the housekeeping staff realized, wait a minute, Mrs. Chin, like some Asians, are pretty short. 153 or whatever, tall, short little lady from Hong Kong. Wait a minute. So she alerted the floor manager, that alerted the GM, and on the next day for Mrs. Chen, there was, in some beautiful, expensive wood from Indonesia, there was a little staircase in front of the bed with a little metal plate, "Welcome back, Mrs. Chin, Fullerton Management," whatever. Because they realized one thing, yes, she was short, but also at that time, I don't know whether you remember, some of you, hotel beds, there was a fad with hotel beds that were very, very high at some point in time, and they kind of took that back again, but it was a stupid ideas by the hotels, and they all rolled it back, costing tons of money. It was like, even I could not get into my hotel bed. And of course, 153 would not even get close to it. So on the next visit, could you imagine, I mean, this staircase cost $60, nothing. But what does it do in the mind of the customer? So you're gonna empower your people, you're gonna empower your culture, you're gonna make sure that information flows also internally, because very often those type of ideas are killed. So is that about getting better, or is that about getting different? Once you get back, you'll get the slides, no worries. I think, and I've seen it a lot, and that will be my first stress test of a company, whether that's a aspiring luxury brand, current luxury brand, but it could be any other brand. It could be a German car manufacturer, it could be anyone, it could be an airline. I first want to discuss those points before I even gonna get in to discuss content, colors, shapes, seasons, pricing, retail, which is all important because that brings luxury to life. Not much of this brings to life, but in my world, the way I operate, that is at least the first step in order to do that. And you can go back, whether you are in a company, changing companies, aspire to be in one, try to go back on a scale from 1 to 10, how well do I do on those 10 different features? Because in my world, that's exactly what kicks off a very solid framework and infrastructure to become iconic and hopefully one day to become global. Global is not necessarily, I think, a key objective, but somehow some companies just stumble to become very iconic brands on a worldwide scale. Join the conversation. I run a site, but most important here, what is applicable to you, you can have a free chapter of my book, but you can also see in my Insights library, go to martinworld.com/articles, has hundreds of luxury brands, hotel brands, brand insights, marketing, whatever. So just invite you to kind of join the conversation if you're interested to dig more into it, and make sure you're of sorts where you'll get all the slides from all of that.